Hello, everybody. Welcome in live to our Kroger Kickoff. We're standing here kind of like the bowels of Neyland Stadium, and there are, no exaggeration, a couple thousand Georgia fans gather around me right now. There had been talk all week long about just how many Georgia fans might be in attendance. Still too early to say what it looks like inside Neyland Stadium in a few minutes, but what it looks like outside Neyland Stadium right now is tons and tons of Georgia fans. They're getting ready for the DawgWalk, and of course you've been a part of that with us all season long here on our Kroger Kickoff, and that will continue for us here in just a little bit as well. The best intel that we have is we're about 8 minutes away, I think, from the Georgia buses arriving. Could be a little sooner than that, but best guess is maybe about 8 minutes away. They'll be here. You should get a chance to see the players get off the bus and walk across the screen in front of you over to my right to the bottom of Neyland Stadium, where they'll go in and get ready for this 7 o'clock kickoff against the Tennessee Vols. As I said before, it's great to have you as a part of our Kroger Kickoff here this evening. My name is Brandon Adams. We also have time to talk to you a little bit on both Facebook and YouTube. We'll take your comments about what you expect to see happen during the game tonight. A little bit of news on the Tennessee front here over the course of the last 24 hours. Actually, a good bit of news. Looks like the quarterback situation could be certainly up for grabs. Jared Garantano, who has been the Tennessee starter, there have been some reports, including I believe the SEC Network, who breaks this first, that Garantano is not expected to start. They were showing starting lineups in Neyland Stadium a little earlier. They didn't make their way around to the quarterback situation, so we don't yet know if it'll be Garantano or Maurer, as has been reported, starting for Tennessee at a quarterback here today. But that's obviously going to be something that's watched and paid close attention to. Tennessee has struggled mightily offensively. You don't have to look very far around Knoxville to talk to Tennessee fans who will point the finger for that frustration. And the reason for those struggles, they may mention Jim Chaney, to be completely honest. But in addition to Chaney, one of the things that will also come up is an offensive line for the Vols that has struggled. It's actually, ironically, one of the areas in which Jeremy Pruitt may have done as well recruiting as he has at any position group. But guys like Wanya Morris and Darnell Wright, for now, are young freshmen, and they're still looking to grow into roles as more established offensive linemen. For now, though, this is a group, in terms of protecting Garantano and opening up holes for the run, they just have not done very well. It's one of the reasons why Georgia has hovered somewhere around a 24, as high as 25.5, and I guess settling in here before game time is about a 24.5-point favorite. No one expects this game to be close, and yet for Georgia, it's got bigger goals in mind than just dominating Tennessee. It wants to use this month of October, including games in subsequent weeks against South Carolina and Kentucky, to get ready for a stretch of games that really matters, whether it's the world's largest outdoor cocktail party with Florida, currently leading against Auburn, those same Tigers later on in that month, and then who knows what happens beyond that. Georgia fans certainly hope a return to the SEC championship. It's the work done in games this month, including this one this Saturday against the Vols. It'll go a long way towards determining just what kind of team Georgia will be when it plays the games that will decide the championships here for this season. So a lot at stake for Georgia, certainly intrigue. These two programs have won evenly against each other. The winner of this game today can play the honor of saying that they've got the all-time series advantage. Georgia fans certainly hope that's them. So plenty on the line here today. We'll take your comments about what you think is expected to be happen as we kill a little time here, probably about 5 or so minutes away from the DawgWalk here, a part of our Kroger Kickoff. And by the way, if you're getting ready for a party here today to watch this game, or you're tailgating with your high school team on Friday, or the brand of football played on Sundays, whatever it is, don't forget Kroger's a great place to go for that. Big savings on all kinds of items for your tailgate party or your game watching party. Just make sure you download the card for special savings. Use the Kroger app, Kroger.com, and you can get in on that and enjoy some very special savings getting ready for some big weekends of watching football, including this one here tonight. Thanks so much for being a part of our Kroger Kickoff. With that said, I'm going to try to pull up some comments here on both Facebook and YouTube, and we'll kind of get rolling and give you a chance to weigh in on what you expect to see before we wait on the DawgWalk here. Looking forward to that. Shane Guy letting us know that Bo Nix just went deep for Auburn. So, all right, Auburn down by a point right now. So a little bit of a back-and-forth action. There was kind of a split decision there a little bit this week anyway, in terms of those who thought it might be Auburn, those who thought it might be Florida. So Florida does lead with a 14-13. 10 minutes left in the half there. So we'll keep our eye on that one as we also get ready for the Georgia Bulldogs a little bit later on this evening. And as you walked around Knoxville here today, a lot of TVs tuned into that game. Of course, Georgia fans have a lot of interest in both those teams. Tennessee, a long-standing rivalry with Florida. So there was a lot of interest here in Knoxville when it comes to that. More of your comments going in here. Marcus Bass, thanks for the score update. Christina Andrews says, go Dogs. Appreciate that. Paul Alexander says, do you think we should throw more? So, Paul, I think that's a question on the mind of a lot of Georgia fans. How much more varied does this offense need to be, and how much more does quarterback Jake Fromm need to have the reins loosened on him and give him a chance to do what a lot of Georgia fans think he does best, which is deliver the football to receivers in a place they can catch it? My belief on that has been, and I've talked about that a lot this week on DawgNation Daily, that I don't necessarily think that Georgia's offense needs to be drastically different from what it is right now. You don't need to greatly change the balance of throw to run. This is still a team that's got great offensive linemen. This is still a team that's got great running backs, and obviously it'd be foolish not to take advantage of that. But admittedly, I do believe that Georgia could add an extra dimension to its offensive attack by a couple more throws a game and really trying to attack defenses deep, stretch them vertically, take advantage of what we think George Pickens probably does best. Lawrence Cager, we saw that some from him in the Notre Dame game 2 weeks ago. Dominic Blaylock kind of in that group too. Maybe the kind of guy that can catch the football and then make a would-be tackler miss and turn that into a long game. But Georgia, I think, has a pretty talented crop, albeit in some cases unseasoned and untested wide receivers. A day like today is a chance to get some experience for those guys and starts to stretch the boundaries of what we think of in terms of the capabilities of the Georgia offense. One of the things I'll say about Tennessee is a bad football team is going to be virtually bad in every position group, and for Tennessee, that's certainly probably the case. One area in which I do think Tennessee is a little deeper than in some position groups is alongside the defensive secondary. Now, they've had a couple of injuries. Alontae Taylor banged up. His status for this game may be a little bit uncertain. Warren Burrell kind of the same way. Cornerback, his status uncertain too. But Bryce Thompson is back from a suspension. This is a group that has done a decent job this year in limiting passing offense. Florida kind of had its way with this group when they got together a couple of weeks ago. But for the most part, statistically speaking, the Tennessee secondary's done okay this season. So if you're Georgia and you're looking to get your wide receivers some experience and some testing, the Tennessee secondary is actually probably not a bad group to try to do that against. And I do think that's going to be one of the games within the game involving Georgia and Tennessee today. How much more does Georgia challenge through the air? How much more aggressive does the play calling get for Jake Fromm? An unquestioned field general, a guy that's very smart when it comes to changing plays in the line of scrimmage and things like that. Do they also let him kind of show off his gunslinger side a little bit too? A lot of Georgia fans hope the answer to that question is yes. We'll do a few more here on Facebook for a moment while we're waiting on the start of the dog walk, and then we'll swing over and take a look at the YouTube comment section here a little bit there as well. Kimberly Leonusa says that Tennessee might be a little bit more ready than we think. Well, Kimberly, it certainly sounds like you've been listening to Georgia coach Kirby Smart this week, because to anyone who would listen, Smart's essentially been saying the same thing all week long too. During his Tuesday press conference, for instance, he called Tennessee dangerous. A lot of Georgia fans laugh at the idea of Tennessee being dangerous because they've seen them play, but if you're a coach, you don't believe the same thing that fans do on that kind of stuff. Georgia coaches, Georgia players don't have the luxury of treating Tennessee like what it is, probably right now kind of a bad football team. They have to think about this as the next opponent up and be ready for, as the commenter said, a Tennessee team that's maybe a little bit more ready than some fans would have thought. So I think that your comment probably reflects very well on the way that the Georgia coaches, the Georgia players are treating this one. They're certainly not looking past Tennessee to any other game. They're certainly paying very close attention to the opponent here this Saturday, and they've got things to work on. Kirby Smart's talked a lot this week about areas in which they want to improve. The players themselves have addressed that there as well. So I'm sure the Vols will get the full focus of UGA today, even though some fans may be looking a little bit more at what happens between Florida and Auburn and what's maybe yet to come for the Georgia Bulldogs. I don't expect the team itself to be doing that. I think that's a really good point. Christopher Fletcher says it's a business meeting. Keep chopping, dogs, keep chopping. And Christopher, I love your phrasing on that. Obviously, the keep chopping mantra is something that Kirby Smart has made famous at Georgia, but the idea of a business meeting is also something that I think is really interesting here, too. And you'll see that with your own eyes in a moment. The hill to my left is where the Georgia team is going to come down. When they get off these buses, and by now many of you have seen a lot of these dog walks before, you know the Georgia players will be dressed in business attire. They won't have very many smiles on their face. They may be a little bit pleasantly surprised to see as many Georgia fans out here as they are, but the Georgia team itself does treat something like this like a business meeting, like a business trip. And so this is, for the most part, and I mean this in the most complimentary way possible, this is for the most part a pretty emotionless Georgia team. They go about their business and their work, and they look to dominate opponents, and they look to get back on the bus or get back on the plane and then come back home after that. Got an update to give us here? Okay, so we may have something going on here. Connor Riley letting me know he's monitoring what's happening there at Florida and Auburn. It looks like Kyle Trask may be down with an injury. Difficult to say yet how serious that is, but the initial look that we're getting from Connor says that it looks like it could be a pretty significant injury. So that's what's going on there. Now, we know that Felipe Frank's already out with the season with an injury. If Trask were to be uninjured and unable to return to this game against Auburn, now you're talking about Emory Jones, former high four-star signee from the class of 2018. Jones was a one-time Ohio State commit. He was a top-flight prospect, although he has not played much in his career since coming to Gainesville, only playing in spot duty. He played just briefly in the Georgia game, if you'll remember, a year ago. So keep your eye on what may have gone on here with Trask, potentially another quarterback entry for the Florida Gators. So we'll watch that as we roll through here on this today. We're getting a word that Trask did walk himself off to the off the field, but he does go directly to the locker room, so we'll pay close attention to that. Justin Sisk says about this game beyond the injury, I just don't know who needs to win the Auburn-Florida game. My mind won't let me pull for either one. I do get that. You know, on DawgNation Daily, we've obviously made a case that Georgia's biggest rival is Florida, and I realize that a lot of you just don't agree with that. You know, I feel like I've done a pretty good job of evangelizing on this message over the course of the last couple of years, but for many of you, Auburn's just as much of a hated foe as Florida is, and to a certain extent, I kind of get that. I kind of understand where that's coming from, and so while you won't hear me audibly pulling for Auburn today, I couldn't bring myself to do that. If Florida loses, I'll certainly be glad about that, and so I think the good thing from a Georgia standpoint is that Georgia's now at the point now where it really doesn't need to root for or against anyone. Georgia's got everything it needs out in front of it. Georgia's got everything it needs in terms of the schedule it gets to play, the games it gets to win, and this is not a team now like so many around the country that need help. It's kind of an overused phrase in sports to say you control your own destiny, but truly in terms of the outcome for the season, Georgia's fate is in its own hands. It gets a chance to go out there and take care of its own business. So one way or another, while you may have a rooting interest based on rivalries, in terms of needing one win or the other, luckily for Georgia, all it has to worry about is itself right now. Justin, I think that's a really good comment. I'm glad to have you weigh in. Got a little bit more time before the dog walk begins here. I want to hop over and say hello to the folks on YouTube here for a moment, give you a chance to weigh in and talk about what you're seeing and getting ready for as we get ready for this very exciting game later on this evening. Of course, it's our Kroger Kickoff here. We're brought to you by our friends at Kroger, and the good news is if you're in the state of Georgia, it's actually feeling a little bit like fall today. I know in the Atlanta area, we had temperatures down in the 70s. That means it's time for, pumpkin-flavored coffee, time for pumpkin-scented candles, and all the other stuff involving the fall. And you can get great savings on all that at Kroger, the great spot to get you ready for fall right there at Kroger. The bad news is, and I don't even know how this is meteorologically possible, we're 3 hours north of Georgia here in Knoxville. It's like 80-something degrees here today. I thought the farther north you went, the colder it got. That's not the case here, where it's much warmer in Tennessee than it is in the state of Georgia. But those of us who are lucky enough to be here, you won't hear too many of us complaining about that. All right, let me pull up some stuff here over here on the YouTube side of things. We'll give you a chance to weigh in, and we're now, any moment now, the dog walk should get ready to begin, and I hope that this is not going to be like the Vanderbilt thing all over again, where we did this show for an hour and a half and the dog walk never happened. Something tells me that the folks around the stadium here in Knoxville at Neyland Stadium are going to be a little bit more organized than maybe they were in Nashville to start the season. So I know that we've already had one show this year where we promised a dog walk and didn't deliver it. I don't think that's going to be the case today. I believe we should be able to see the Georgia team roll its way through here in just a couple of minutes. But while we're killing that time and talking about this game in particular, we'll give you a chance to weigh in on what you expect to see. We'll do more on Facebook in a moment. Let me go YouTube here for right now. Jethro Smith says, so happy the Dogs play on ESPN. Yeah, Jethro, really good broadcast combination today. I think that Todd Blackledge, one of the great analysts in this sport, former, obviously, Penn State quarterback. Sean McDonough, I think, is one of the great play-by-play voices. Longtime SEC fans will remember McDonough as the former voice of the SEC on CBS prior to Vern Lundquist taking that job. McDonough is a tremendous voice, so pretty good broadcast team for this one here this evening. And, of course, a lot of folks remember Blackledge being the color analyst for the Georgia win at Alabama back in 2007. I don't know why that popped in my head, and I'm sure he's done a million Georgia games since then, but Blackledge in 2007 comes to mind. Maybe because that was that Britney Spears game where Mike Patrick, the play-by-play announcer, referenced Spears. Maybe that's what that was about, but for some reason you never know what pops in your mind in situations like this. Chris Stasiak says Jones is in the game and looking good, so we'll keep our eye on that. Tony Jackson says the Vols are confident. Yeah, I'm sure there's been a little bit of a reboot with this program, just given the fact that they had the week off last week. Of course, Georgia had the same thing. The talk of a quarterback change, sometimes that can galvanize a team. Ultimately, though, you got to go out and play the game on the field, and I'm of the firm belief that Garantano is still the best of the Tennessee quarterbacks. And eventually, I believe, and I could be wrong, but my prediction is that Garantano still plays the most here this evening over Maurer, who's rumored to be the starter there on that one. So my guess is we still see more of Garantano than anyone, but sometimes the rumor of a quarterback change or the discussion of a quarterback change, to even have a different signal caller taking the first snap of the game, that can provide an extra level of energy, and maybe that's what Jeremy Pruitt's counting on here for this evening. Chevron Hanna, not a fan of the Vols, and I'm sure there are a lot of UGA fans who agree with that. Bill Kibbe says Emory Jones is from his hometown of LaGrange, and he's a baller. A lot of folks wouldn't disagree with that at all. Chris Stazak also reminding us of kind of a bad memory that in the '83 Sugar Bowl after the '82 season, it was Blackledge's Nittany Lions of Penn State that did beat Georgia in that third of 3 straight Sugar Bowls for Georgia. So not the greatest memory from Blackledge there in that regard, but he's also been a really good analyst now for a long time. Maybe you can hear the UGA chant starting to build around us here. As I said before, there are a lot of Georgia fans here in place and a lot of fans ready to see this dog walk going down, and it's certainly an exciting time to see so many Georgia fans on the road here to see this football team and here to see what they have in store for one of the historic rivals of this program, the Tennessee Vols. That is certainly going to be a lot of fun, and we'll look forward to being able to bring that for you. Dog walk, and then, of course, coverage of the game after that. During the game, I'll be live in the forum throughout, forum.DawgNation.com. Of course, great coverage at DawgNation.com, too. After the game, once it's over, we'll be in the Georgia locker room to catch up with some of the players and coaches, including Coach Kirby Smart. And then on the field after that for our Pella Window postgame show. Hope you'll check in with us after the game for that as we bring you all the coverage and all the sights and sounds here from Knoxville this evening. More of your comments on YouTube for a moment. Chris Clark says his prediction, 42-13. He's got the Dogs in a big win against the Vols, maybe hearkening back a bit to the 2003 game, in which Georgia was a blowout winner here in Knoxville. Sean Jones, scoop and score for a touchdown coming to mind there. 42-13 would certainly be reminiscent of that. So Green Soldier says it's now 17-13 Florida over Auburn. So Gators add a field goal here. He says the Florida wide receivers having some success against these Auburn defensive backs, and that Florida wide receiver core, whether you talk about some of that group, Cleveland and Jefferson, that's a pretty talented group. Among the position groups where Florida's the strongest, it's probably along that wide receiver core. And while the Auburn defensive backs have played well up until now, I think most people would say the front seven, and in particular the defensive line, the strength of the Auburn defense. So thus far, it sounds like Florida using one of its strengths to exploit to the extent that the Auburn defense has a vulnerability. Secondary might be that. So it sounds like Florida's had some success with that. And Green Soldier, we appreciate you giving us an update on that. I'm looking forward to, as soon as our Kroger kickoff coverage is done, kind of diving in there myself and getting a chance to hopefully watch a little bit of this on television before Georgia and Tennessee kicks off at 7 p.m. This dog also reminding us something we talked about a little earlier. If you are just joining us, I know many of you kind of coming to us during the show here, that Kyle Trask, the Florida quarterback, did leave the game with an injury. As we said, the severity of that injury is not yet known, but Emory Jones, the former four-star signee from the 2018 class, is currently playing quarterback for Florida. That'll be the third quarterback that the Gators have used this year. Obviously, you'll remember that beginning of the season starter Felipe Franks did leave with an injury earlier this season. Other comments from our YouTube comment section. Kelvin Mitchell says Junkyard Dogs defense show up and show out today, and a lot of Georgia fans are certainly hoping to see a big performance from the UGA defense. There's no doubt about that. Kelvin, we appreciate you weighing in on that. Tony Jackson says that Auburn had not faced wide receivers like Florida's, and that's probably true. And we talked about that a little bit this week on DawgNation Daily. To the extent that you follow point spreads, especially as a way of judging public opinion about a game, it's actually a pretty amazing transformation how the feeling around Auburn has really enhanced over the last couple of weeks. Auburn went to Texas A&M a couple of weeks ago as a 4-point underdog in that game. They win that game and then go the next week back to Auburn and blow out Mississippi State. So at that point in time, you have a Auburn team that had been an underdog on the road at Texas A&M, but this week, for most of the week, they were a 3-point favorite over Florida. That number did get down to about 2.5 a little later on in the week, but for the most part, they were a field goal favorite. That's a pretty big, huge transformation because obviously if Texas A&M played Florida on a neutral field, the Aggies would not be a 7-point favorite. So you get the idea of how quickly the public, and the betting public in particular, reconsidered Auburn. And maybe some of that is coming home to roost here against Florida right now as the Gators play with a lead. And what sounds like has been a pretty intense game, low scoring, the way that some might would have thought. So we'll keep paying attention to that. And we will tell you that we are still a couple of minutes away from the DawgWalk, expecting that to come any time now. I haven't seen any of the early signs of Georgia coming through, although now starting to see some of those Georgia G dignitaries starting to roll their way through here. So we're getting close to the start of that, and the presence of some of these team officials would lead you to believe that Georgia's not too far away here or there as well. Security starting to pay close attention. You hear the cheers going up. Looks like the DawgWalk's ready to begin. So we'll swing our camera around and let folks get ready to see what's about to happen here. So you can kind of get a chance to see for yourself the Georgia team getting ready to make its way in there. The first Georgia bus is on its way to arriving. Here's a part of our Kroger Kickoff. You'll see the team get off in just a moment. The crowd is starting to cheer. A lot of excitement. Georgia State Patrol officers starting to get off this here bus. And the big cheer that you hear there is for Georgia coach Kirby Smart. Headphones coming off. Smart's going to walk right in front of your screen, and you'll see the Georgia coach. A business-like approach, game face on, ready for this one today against the Tennessee Vols. Georgia, 24.5-point favorite. Here comes defensive coordinator Dan Lanning, offensive lineman Ben Cleveland. Here is Jake Fromm, Cade Mays making his return to Knoxville. No doubt Mays dreamed of entering the stadium to play games as a kid. Now he'll do it as a member of the opposition. DeAndre Swift, Andrew Thomas, Jonas Jennings, Dell McGee. Here's Charlie Warner, the tight end. Growing up in North Georgia, you know this game has extra special meaning for him. Isaiah Wilson and Trey Hill, two of the important offensive linemen for this team, starts to come by. Here is Georgia running back Brian Harry, and always very impressively dressed, looking great. Families of these Georgia players here to say hello to these guys as Demetrius Robertson comes by. Solomon Kinley walks by, seemingly not wearing any kind of protective braces on his feet, so keep your eye on that for McKinley maybe being in better health than some Georgia fans hope. Seem to be unbothered as he walks through here. Jordan Davis coming by. More Georgia players continue to file through. Georgia coaches, Sam Pittman, the Georgia offensive line coach. He's coming by. There's Dominic Blaylock and Trey Blunt, two of this team's wide receivers. Some high fives continue going around. Tyler Simmons walking by. Here is Nakobe Dean. A little more subdued look from Dean this week after being quite fashion forward the last couple of weeks. Stetson Bennett coming by. Malik Herring sporting a closely trimmed haircut here, looking good there. Huge cheers for the Dogs as the DawgWalk continues. Chris Smith coming by. Always good to see him. The rest of these Georgia players continue to file through. Adam Anderson looking great today. A big part of this Georgia pass rush a little bit later on this evening when these two teams get together. So it's a huge throng of the Georgia Bulldogs continuing to file their way through. Just getting ready for the Dogs and the Vols inside Neyland Stadium. Really appreciate you being a part of our Kroger Kickoff coverage. Among the last players to come off will be George Pickens, the freshman wide receiver. You see him there. There's Nate McBride coming through as well. And that'll about do it for Georgia coaches and players. Looks like they may have just about made their way through. And actually, Richard LeCount going to very calmly and coolly kind of bring up the rear there. LeCount in no big hurry, but you know that will be different once he's on the field. He'll be as fired up and energetic as anyone at that point in time. Georgia officials continue to kind of roll through. The DawgWalk 2019 for the Georgia Bulldogs and the Tennessee Vols. And the hundreds upon hundreds, if not thousands of fans who've gathered around here to see Georgia ready for this football game today. The game faces told all the story. Hope you get a chance to see that for yourself there as well. As we said before, don't forget, there'll be live coverage of the game during the game on our forum at forum.DawgNation.com, an ongoing chat reacting to everything that happens. Then after the game, immediately after we have a chance to visit with some coaches and players in the locker room, we'll do our Pella Window post-game show from the field. Thanks for being a part of our Kroger Kickoff here for now. Enjoy the weekend and the game, everybody. We'll talk to you again next time.